Hello, this is Dr. Eldred Taylor, and we are here with another one of our exciting speakers, Dr. Tom O'Brien, and he is going to be speaking at our annual Functional Medicine Conference at the Georgia World Congress Center in Atlanta, Georgia on November the 12th through the 15th, 2015. Now, Dr. Tom O'Brien is a nationally recognized author, lecturer, and medical expert on celiac disease and gluten intolerance. He was recently selected as one of the 5 nationally recognized presenters on 21st century endocrinology. He is the Vice President of the Illinois chapter of the International and American Association of Clinical Nutritionists. Dr. O'Brien is the past president of the Chicago Chiropractic Society and a past director of the Illinois Chiropractic Society. He is a diplomat of the National Board of Chiropractic Examiners, a diplomat of the American Board of Clinical Nutrition, and a certified clinical nutritionist with the International and American Association of Clinical Nutritionists. Dr. O'Brien is a certified applied kinesiologist. He is a certified practitioner in functional biomechanics from the Motion Palpation Institute. Dr. O'Brien has been a visiting instructor at Northeastern Illinois University, where he has taught applied nutrition for health and performance. He is a visiting instructor at the National University of Life Sciences. Now, on Saturday morning, November the 14th, Dr. O'Brien will be our first speaker, and he will be speaking on the role of food sensitivity in autoimmune and chronic disease. Dr. O'Brien, how are you? So nice to have you, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation to come to our American Functional Medicine Conference.
Well, thank you, Dr. Taylor. It's a real honor to be a part of this team that you've put together.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad you're going to be a welcomed addition, and we have spoken together in the past, and I've heard you on some of your webcasts, and you are by far the most knowledgeable person that I've ever heard speak on gluten intolerance, and it's especially important to me because my son is gluten intolerant, and so I'm very interested in what you have to say, and so I'll be quiet and let you give us a little just a little taste, enough to wet our whistle, so that we'll be even more excited about coming to hear you in November.
Well, thank you. You know, I put a smile on my face with what you just said, because the first thing I would say to you is, where do you think he got his sensitivity?
Yeah.
We don't think about that, you know. You know, my son's got a problem, but I don't, and my wife does. But my son's got a problem. So, as we learn about this, you know, as you start to read the science, people consistently do an OMG. I didn't believe, oh my God, I didn't believe that. I didn't know that. Wow, I didn't know that. And so it really is a question of just learning the science. And on this first talk that we'll be giving, this consistently drops the jaws of doctors. I believe I would preface by saying that my mentor in presentation style is Dr. Jeffrey Bland.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a reputation of talking a little faster than Jeff on stage. But what that means is that I show the studies. I just show the studies. I don't give any interpretations. I just show what the researchers say. And I'll show what this author in the New England Journal of Medicine said, and this group in the Journal of the American Medical Association said, and this group in endocrinology said. And you start to see the picture. So I'm going to give you an overview now of one of the main themes of this first presentation. Most of us believe that the #1 cause of getting sick and dying in the world is cardiovascular disease, and #2 is cancer. The National Institute of Health tells us that 22 million people a year are diagnosed with cardiovascular disease in the U.S., and 9 million people a year are diagnosed with cancer. But 24 million people a year are diagnosed with autoimmune diseases. And we also know that only 1 out of 3 with an autoimmune disease is diagnosed. That means there are 72 million people out there with a certified disease that there's been so much tissue damage that has progressed to the point to where the body can no longer compensate for this inflammatory cascade, and there is a disease going on. 72 million people in our country today. Next point. As of about 10 years ago, the research papers started coming out that show us that atherosclerosis is autoimmune in its initiating phases. And there are many, many, many studies on this. Now show 4 or 5 studies from the Journal of Cardiology, the Journal of American Medical Association, and New England Journal of Medicine. I'll just show the studies where you see that the initiating triggers in the development of cardiovascular disease, which we thought is the #1 cause of getting sick and dying, that the initiating trigger is autoimmune. Once we open up our minds to see, all right, okay, I get that. All right, so autoimmune is the trigger to cardiovascular disease, and there are 72 million people with autoimmune diseases. All right, then it becomes apparent that it's rational to consider that the #1 mechanism in getting sick and dying in the United States today, the #1 mechanism is your immune system attacking self. For whatever reason, the immune system is attacking self, and it may manifest cardiovascular in your blood vessels with atherosclerosis and arteriosclerosis. It may manifest in your liver. It may manifest in your brain, wherever it manifests, and we'll talk about all of that, but that the #1 mechanism looks like it's an autoimmune mechanism that triggers the degenerative diseases that we suffer from today. Once we accept that as a rational premise, then we start thinking, my gosh, so how often is this in my practice? It's in your practice every day, every single day. It's in our practices, but we don't recognize it and we don't identify it because we've been trained to wait for the end stage of the autoimmune mechanism. And the end stage is when we get diagnosed with an autoimmune disease because the organ can no longer compensate. So there is this whole foundational premise that I'm going to ask our attendees to just consider and look at the science. And you're not going to get it in 1 hour. You know, you can't know it all, but we'll give you the studies, we'll give you the references, so that hopefully in the weeks afterwards, you'll read 1 paper a week, 1 paper every 2 weeks on this topic, and you'll start to see that, wow, there's a lot of validity to this. Wow, this is really going on quite a bit of the time. Now, the importance of this is we know that the trilogy in the development of autoimmune diseases, there's a trilogy, and the trilogy, this started coming out in 2002, I believe, were the first studies on this, 13 years ago. The trilogy is a genetic vulnerability to that particular autoimmune mechanism. You can't do anything about that. That's just your genes in your vulnerable link. But whether the genes get turned on or not is the issue. We all know that. So the first in the trilogy is the gene. The second is an environmental trigger that sets it off, kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. And the third is intestinal permeability. The slang term is leaky gut, the pathogenic intestinal permeability. And the paper started coming out in 2005 that said, and this is their language, Dr. Taylor, you can arrest the development of autoimmune disease, the #1 mechanism in getting sick and dying in the world today, in the industrialized world. You can arrest the development of autoimmune disease by healing the gut. And I'll show the papers. I'll show the exact language from the researchers. That's what they say. So what I'm hoping to achieve in this presentation is to have our attendees begin thinking about this concept and reframing how we look at our patients coming in terms of how do we, of course, deal with their presenting symptomatic complaints, but what's the bigger picture that we want to educate these patients on? And Mrs. Patient, it might be worth exploring this world of autoimmune mechanisms because you have a family history of rheumatoid arthritis or Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. We all know no one gets Alzheimer's in their 60s or 70s. You get Alzheimer's in your 20s or 30s, and it's a decades-long process of slowly killing off our brain cells before there's so much tissue damage. Now you've got the problem. And some of us may know Dr. Dale Bredesen, who runs the Alzheimer's Institute at UCLA. Just last November, he published on reversing Alzheimer's in 9 out of 10 patients at UCLA over a 4-year period. And what did he do? He did functional medicine. He took, there was just over 40 markers that he looked at. Okay, do they have this? They have this. They have this. They have this. And he just fixed them. He fixed them as best he could, and he reversed Alzheimer's in 9 out of 10 people. If they were checked into an Alzheimer's facility, they were able to be checked out and live at home. If they were living at home but couldn't work, they were able to go back to work. It's jaw-dropping. It's jaw-dropping when you look at a functional medicine perspective on this. And Dr. Bredesen's paper is fabulous for that, and we'll talk about that one in detail. But that's this first talk. That's what we're going to do, is talk about kind of a context by which to look at our patients, irrespective of what they present with.
Yeah. My training is in OBGYN, and I often joke that when I was an OBGYN and I learned about bioidentical hormones, I thought everything revolved around the ovary. And then, I moved on from that to stress, but it really is amazing what can happen when you fix the gut. So you're really saying that the cardiovascular disease can be reversed by fixing the gut. Number one killer. And I'm
That's
sure,
the first step.
yeah, yeah. So, it's amazing. The gut is really amazing. It's a second brain, but it really is the entry point to most disease. So great. Well, Dr. O'Brien, we are looking forward to, and I'm really looking forward to that reversing Alzheimer's. My mother died of Alzheimer's, and it's always, I had several aunts and uncles on that side of the family, so that's a real interest to me also. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that Bredesen study, because that's really close to home. So uh,
You
anyway,
bet. You bet.
so Dr. O'Brien, thanks a lot. Now he keeps talking about the first lecture, because Dr. O'Brien, his information is so nice. We want to hear him twice. So he has another lecture that we'll also be sending out. But for now, that's what you can expect from his first lecture, the role of food sensitivity in autoimmune and chronic disease. And he will be presenting that on Saturday, November the 14th at our annual Functional Medicine Conference at the Georgia World Congress Center on November the 12th through the 15th, 2015. So please, please, please register early. Our early bird registration ends in September. So please don't wait, and register as soon as possible. Dr. O'Brien, thank you so much, and we will record your little introduction for your next lecture here very soon. So thanks a lot again. Thanks so much for accepting our invitation, and we really look forward to hearing you in November.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I feel the same. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.